Everyone out there, Dan here from Geekcast Radio. It's been quite some time since I've actually done a video, but life's just been crazy busy, and I wanted to kind of get back to it, and I thought I'd go through some comics I recently picked up, and to talk about them, let you know what I'm reading as of late, what I think of it. Before I get into some of the more recent stuff, I was able to go to my local store, and they had a lot of great dollar bin comics. And usually the dollar bin, you get a lot of the classic books, sometimes a lot of the 90 books, or just books that are in bad condition. They actually had a lot of the recent stuff that I was able to pick up. Most notably, I picked up the first 5 issues of the current Invader series. By Chip Zdarsky. I've really been enjoying this book. I've actually read every issue so far. I don't own the physical copies though. It's really a Namor story. In a way, this actually began in Jason Aaron's Avengers run. There's like a 2-issue Namor focused story with the Avengers and Namor going on at it. And this expands from there. It kind of gets into his history, his really troubled past, but it really makes him into a sympathetic character. Namor to me is one of the best characters in Marvel when he's written correctly, and this kind of proves it with this issue. Part villain, sometimes hero. This cover kind of deals with it. He's also, the first mutant, quote unquote. And I hate kind of always linking things back to Ed Brubaker's Captain America, but it does have a similar vibe to that and how it mixes the World War II stuff along with the present day. It does have multiple artists on it as well. It's a good looking book that I would highly advise picking up. Definitely worth $5. The other issues I was able to pick up, I picked up issue number 5 of Bitterroot, and I own every issue of this comic so far. This was just a variant of issue number 5, and I usually don't buy variants, but for $1 I will. This is Mike Del Mundo doing the cover. This is actually written by David F. Walker, Chuck Brown, and with art by Sanford Green. This is one of my favorite current comics out right now. It's a great looking book. It takes place in the 1920s Harlem Renaissance, dealing with these kind of different monsters, this family that fights against them. And I know supernatural stuff can be done to death, but this really has an original take on it, and it's also just gorgeous looking. Sanford Green he needs to be like a household name, and he was great on Power Man and Iron Fist with David F. Walker, and I think even better here, the style of this time, the story really fits his sensibilities really well. His art just has so much life to it. He really uses the page. There's not like an inch of the page that is not full of color and life, which makes it such a good book. The other book I picked up and this is another $1 find, is Love and Romance. This is the Young Guns variant, which is upside. No, it is right side up. Spider-Man. I like the cover. It's kind of sweet. I didn't read this. I know they did a lot of these one-shots. There was the war one. There was that. There was a few others. I thought I'd give it a shot. It was only $1. Look, War of the Realms. That's coming out, which I actually quite enjoyed. But just I think a number of just anthology stories of dealing with romance back, when Marvel used to do that. So I thought I'd give it a read, see how I like it. Again, worst case scenario, only spend $1 on it. So why not? Now into the newer stuff, and for the newer stuff, I did try to arrange this into things that I am least anticipating, the most anticipating. Obviously, these are books that I bought myself, so they're books I'm actually looking forward to reading. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're all on the same level. I'll start with Venom Annual number 1. I know these have come out over the last few weeks. This I think came out last week. The reason this is not more highly anticipated for me, it's just not done by the original creative team. Ryan Stegman and Donny Cates are not doing this issue. I didn't love the War of the Realms tie-ins that it did with Cullen Bunn. It just, I don't know, they felt like the example of a tie-in that kind of unnecessary and just filling time a little bit. With annuals, I do. This art is kind of cool. I do like the look. It's much different than what's before. Annuals like this can go either way. Like last year, there was a really great Captain America annual with a very new creative team. It can give up and coming creators time and opportunity to kind of tell a story, to kind of show what they have, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. So this is done by Ryan Cady, who I don't know a lot about, and Simone DiMeo, which I probably pronounced incorrectly, but I'll give it a read. But yeah, annuals can go either way. Next, this is a series I've really enjoyed a lot. I haven't liked it as much with the artist change. It just hasn't been as strong, but still quite a good book, and that's Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 9. This is, to me, the best Spider-Man title out right now. There is a lot of Spider-Man titles, but this has been the best. This actually issue, I think it was issue number 6, I believe. The Spider-Bite issue may be one of my favorite issues of the year thus far. She's super emotionally packed, with great art, great design. This has a lot to do with the Rumor and the Prowler teaming up with Spider-Man taking on foes, and I'm guessing obviously Captain America. But I think I've really enjoyed this when it's been more focused on that neighborhood aspect, the smaller stories. When it's got into some of the bigger stuff, it hasn't been effective. But one of Tom Taylor's best skills as a writer is his ability to capture the essence of characters without ever feeling like we're just redundantly repeating a story that came before. Like he's not beholden to the past, but he is respectful enough of it to kind of think be able to, I think, satisfy longtime fans, but someone like myself that likes to see things evolve. I still really enjoy his stuff, like his X-Men stuff. I liked it a lot. It was sad to see X-Men Red go. But yeah, so this is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 9. The next book, I really know nothing about. I heard some good rumblings. I saw some positive reviews. I didn't read them. I just saw like a lot of people saying you should check this out, and I thought I would. Instead, in Kids number 1. This is put out by Sourceprint Press, which is a publisher I've had inconsistencies with. I've not loved a lot of the stuff I've read, though. This seems to be. I thought the art here looked stronger than most of the books I see from Sourceprint Press. Or at least it fits my style personally more. And this seems to be a little bit more of a straightforward kind of dramatic tale, not necessarily dealing with the supernatural or end of the world scenarios, which I feel like we see it way too much nowadays. But I also have to say this is great quality paper and cover, nice like quality cardstock, all for normal price. So I got to give them credit. They always put a good package together with their comics, which you wish more people would do. Next is from Vault Comics, and that's Queen of Bad Dreams number 3. I pretty much loved everything I've read from Vault Comics for the most part. I have not loved She Said Destroy, which I was also reading. I still need to read issue number 3. This to me has been good. It's not to me the same level as some of their best books like Friendo, which I loved, and Wasted Space, which I think is like one of the best comics going right now. It's still quite good. It deals with a world where dreams can come alive and become their own people, and deals with a lot of existential questions of what that means and what that could mean, and how they're connected to who they originally came from and how can they break free. The art's been pretty strong for the most part. I think if anything though, the world still seems a little ill-defined in just how it looks in its establishments, though. It's very colorful, and I think it really smartly written, so that's why I've been keeping with it. So I would highly advise picking this up, and I think it really was starting to find itself in issue number 2, and looking forward to see it moving for issue number 3. All right, next on the list is Lois Lane, issue number 2. I enjoyed the first issue quite a bit. This is written by Greg Rucka. The artist escapes me at the moment. The art, I do get a big Sean Phillips vibe, although I think not to that same level. I think the one thing that bugged me the first issue was there was a lot of inconsistencies in the art, in the sense of really how characters were designed, especially in the faces. Lois Lane especially, I felt like from one page to the next, the way she really looked different. So it made it kind of hard to understand who was who at times. But outside of that, on a simply storytelling perspective, page layouts, I thought it did a good job, and definitely different from your typical type of superhero style. It fits that more news-based, human-based story a lot better. Noir type of look and style, especially with the coloring, not dealing with more of the everyday mundane aspects of life, and this is a type of story that Greg Rucka does really well with. He knows how to write strong female characters, in noir worlds, things like Stumpland, Lazarus, and I don't know if it's up to that point, and it also seems like a very cathartic type of exercise for him, because this is pointed straight at the direction of today's politics. There's no escaping what it's trying to say. It's not really holding anything back. That might not work for everyone. Some people would prefer a little bit more nuance maybe, but it's at least it's at least fun to read. And like I said, it can be cathartic in a way. Next on the list is Goon. It's not a relaunch really, because it's the same story, but they renumbered it at number 1 a few months ago. This is issue number 5. Eric Powell series. It's been going on for now 20 years or so. It's taking kind of the world of the gangster tough guy from the 1930s and combining it with like the Universal monsters. And it's always a great looking book. Most of these issues you can kind of pick up and read them by themselves. It's just a fun world. full of like wacky and insane monsters. Uh, if you like something like Hellboy, it's not nearly as serious, a little bit more goofy than that, but Eric Powell has a kind of sensibility of his own. There's a reason it's lasted as long as it has. And I've not read a lot of Goon, but the relaunch got me kind of reinterested in it, and I've been sticking with it ever since. So if you're like me and wanted to pick it up, it's, the issue number 1, or a lot of these issues you can pick up and read on their own, and everything you need is right there. Probably the biggest book in both anticipation, size, and price this week is Absolute Carnage, number 1, as we mentioned, with Venom. That was done by different creators because Ryan Stegman and Donny Cates have been putting all their time and energy into this monster of a book. Man, it's a thick looking book. That's for sure. It's basically 3 comics in one. I'm not a huge Venom fan, but I got into Venom mainly because of Donny Cates, and I don't know if I love it as much as a lot of people do, but I get where it's coming from. I think Donny Cates is really great at writing stories that are big and bold. I think where he is not as strong, or is still developing as a writer, is the more human aspect of it. That's the one thing I always commented on in Venom for the most part. For the first half, was that the human element was a little bit missing. A lot of world building, a lot of this mythology building, lore being built. But as the later issues, when it got more into who Eddie Brock was, I got more into it, and I think more people got away from it at that point. But now I think it's kind of combining all that into one. I'm interested to see. I hope we get a good mixture of both. My biggest criticism of the War of the Realms, is that I did love it. It was a just big blockbuster movie type of feel. But I felt like that was such a story that was so character driven, especially the Mighty Thor run. Great dynamics that were not as strong in the main title. I think really you got them more in the side Thor issues and things like that than you did in the main book. So we'll see what this goes, but people want that. Man, I gotta say it's great. Ryan Stegman is killing it with this. As just looking at this right now, so I'm excited to see what this is. I've never been a huge Carnage fan myself, but I go by the motto that there's no such thing as a bad character. A good writer can make any character interesting or bad. So we'll go with it with that. Another big book that came out last week, which was Batman: the Last Night on Earth. Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo dealing with this Elseworld, maybe future world. Where the world's gone to hell, which is often the case. I just want to see a future story where everything kind of worked out okay. I guess it's not the most dramatic, but again, similar with Ryan Stegman and Absolute Carnage, Greg Capullo. It's a big reason I've enjoyed this book a lot. I like Snyder's run on Batman a great deal. I do think I maybe enjoyed Black Mirror the best, and I don't know. Like, Snyder works with me, sometimes he doesn't. Like, his Justice League, I feel like I love one issue, and then the next issue I'm like, this is just a lot of ideas and not a lot of actual story. With this, I felt the first issue had a lot of ideas, but not to the overwhelming sense. I thought it was able to divvy them out well enough. My one big criticism of the first issue was that the way it was presented, it almost presented one story, and it undercut itself because you weren't really sure what was real and what wasn't. And I think when you do that to open a story, you can lead to me not wanting to invest as much because I'm thinking I'm just waiting for the rug to be pulled out to find out, oh, actually, no, this is not at all what you thought it was. This is somewhat a completely different thing but we'll see how it goes. I do like the world he created. It's not following the same rules we typically see when we get the dystopian DC world. The Joker in the jar thing, I don't know if that completely works. I don't know if it ever was fully justified enough to exist, but hey, it's fun. And Bane in that, which is, Bane's a big thing right now. Again, a lot of big books this week, including, I guess I can combine these. This is House of X number 2, along with Powers of X number 1. I've read House of X number 1. I've not read either of these books so far. Jonathan Hickman doing the X-Men, it makes a lot of sense. I like the first issue a good deal. It was exactly what I expect for Jonathan Hickman doing an X-Men book. A lot of ideas. It's funny because I talked about how a lot of ideas want a lot of story. Though I think what's different, though, is that the first issue really just established kind of where the mindset of the mutants were. from Magneto to there's one of my favorite sequences in the first issue of House of X was Cyclops in the Fantastic Four, and how he wrote Cyclops. It just in what way you thought was going to, like, oh no, here we go, here's Cyclops going to fight the Fantastic Four, but ended up going a different direction. I thought that was a good way of just showing that there's going to be a little bit more here than you would anticipate. And I'm a Hickman fan. I love East of West, one of my favorite series out right now over the last of this decade. I love this Avengers run as well. Happy to see him back in Marvel. I know he's not for everyone. His stories are dense. It's like a marathon where you're by halfway through you're wondering, can you keep going? But once you hit that point where things start kind of clicking, it's just the euphoric type of reading, which I usually don't like. I don't necessarily like the puzzle piece that I have to kind of put together bit by bit all the time. I like where characters are a little left out. But I think with Hickman, people talk about his ideas a lot and how he connects all these different plot elements, which is true. But he is a really strong at the characters as well. Like East to West, ultimately this is a father-son story, in that is the core of why that book works up to this point. So, and similar to his Avengers run, it was really a lot of it is his Fantastic Four run. How his dynamic between Reed Richards and Doctor Doom was one of the best written, like how he approached those characters. So I really think his character work is what I have to enjoy the most, although I feel like everything else kind of gets talked about, like his maps and all his grids and layouts, and those are fun, but it's usually not what gets me. Next, one of my favorite creators. Anytime he's writing a book, I'm gonna check it out. Berserker Unbound #1. This is by Jeff Lemire and Mike Deodato. I think everyone's pretty much said, "Oh, this is just we lost the Conan license." Well, you know what? Let's do it anyways. But just create something new, which is fine. Jeff Lemire doing Conan. I don't know. I don't know if I'd ever link those two, and this may not be that. It might be set up to be like, oh, you think it's going to be like a Conan story, but it's something completely different. If Jeff Lemire's writing a book, I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to pretty much enjoy it for the most part. Probably my favorite writer right now. So we'll see. And I like Mike Deodato as well. His art tends to be, he's not my favorite artist, but I've never read a book that he did art for that I didn't enjoy. Yeah, some great action there. So we'll see. A few more books left. Probably the biggest book out that exists, most talked about book, especially in the sense of when speculation and all that fun stuff, is the Immortal Hulk. That's number 22. This came out last week, I believe, and this is continuing Al Ewing's kind of deconstruction, reconstruction, I don't even know what you call it at this point, of the Hulk, his mythos, taking all these different elements of the Hulk, adding a horror vibe to it, really, too, talking about, character focus. Seems to be, in a way, Mike Deodato is writing this as like this letter towards both religion and humanity, of trying to look at where we are and where we've come from, and how we're kind of ruining everything in a lot of ways inside of this superhero story. But there's this was recently nominated for an Eisner. They used to have it on the cover, but they took it off. It didn't win. I know some people are upset. Which I think Giant Jay's won Best Continuous Series, which I love too. I'm actually fine with Giant Jay's winning that, because it's such a good book that doesn't get talked about enough. But yeah, I think pretty much everything that's been said about Immortal Hulk has been said. I think people at this point, either if you're not reading it, you're probably not going to jump on. Maybe, I don't know. But the book, I think, to me, when people talk about best Marvel book, they usually say Immortal Hulk. And it's right up there for me, but I think my favorite current Marvel book is actually Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky. I was a little concerned when the artist changed, when we got a new artist, because the first artist whose name escapes me at the moment. I can't believe I forgot his name. But I apologize. Like I said, it's been a while since I've done this. But it actually makes a lot of sense, because this last arc has been really a Matt Murdock story. Last issue was just a conversation at a table. Thought it was just going to be a dinner party with someone he's trying to kind of hook up with. Ends up being much more than that. Dealing with actually an entire crime family, and just get into, I think, the morality of superheroes, the morality of crime and law, and how it affects different people, different approaches, that people are coming from the perspectives of, it's easy to kind of label this family as evil, but when you see their side, maybe it's a little bit more justified, or at least you can understand where they're coming from. and of course dealing with religion, as you would often see with Daredevil. And what it started off with, like I think Zdarsky, he took what you typically see in a good Daredevil book, him being self-destructive, him kind of being his own worst enemy, but he twisted it quite a bit, where it wasn't another villain that was driving his life crazy. It wasn't another villain that was the catalyst of him kind of falling. It was his own hubris in a way, and now he's just kind of trying to rebuild himself within that. And one of the it was funny, I think 2 issues ago there was this comparison to Paul's story in the Bible, and I'm like, did anyone ever make that approach in a comic before? I couldn't remember, which makes so much sense that you would use that parallel. A man who became blind, who was this evil person, but then it's Saul the sinner, then Paul the preacher. Not to get into a religious discussion, but considering this is Daredevil, and just the matter-of-factness of how you had the scene with the nun who was just like saying, "Stop feeling pity for yourself." What you're dealing with, a lot of people deal with. So I thought it was able to take the approach you would typically see. You could kind of finish the scene of, okay, this is Daredevil, we know where this is going, and then just slightly go in a different direction, not completely subverting expectations, just slightly going in a different way, and it leads to a stronger story that feels still in context with what you want with a Daredevil book. Well, I think Daredevil might be one of his favorite characters in comics, because there's a reason why he has so many infamous runs, from Frank Miller to Brubaker to Bendis. There's something, not just because those creators are great, to now, Zdarsky, I don't know if you could put him up there. It's only been 9 issues, but he's on his way. Last but clearly not least, my most anticipated book comes from what I think, for me, is my pick for the best comic book series of the year thus far, which is American Carnage #9. It's the last issue of this book, maybe the last issue of a Vertigo series worth reading, but this is done by Brian Edward Hill, with art by Leonardo Fernandez. But the concept of this book, which is one that, again, hasn't really been talked about a lot, is you have this African-American detective who goes undercover to infiltrate the white nationalist group, especially this political figure who's running for office. And you can start making the parallels to real life doing that, but Brian Edward Hill, I think, again, similar to Daredevil, he'll present a situation or a concept, and you think, okay, well, I know where this is, I know what you're trying to say, but his approach to it that is different, and he doesn't necessarily go where you expect. He adds a lot of nuance. These characters are really strong characters. Characters that you think you should hate, characters that you think should be evil, and nothing but one-dimensional figures for you to scorn at, end up being somewhat sympathetic, not in somewhat fully realized. So I just found the approach, and the art in this has been fantastic. One of the approaches I love the most is that in a book so centered on race, that shadows are used to the point where so many scenes you really can't tell what race people are in a given moment, especially when tension is at its highest. I just think there's a lot here, and some of the best covers I think of the year as well. And with Vertigo going away, I think this is probably the best Vertigo book we've gotten. It's scalped. It has a lot of similarities in how it's world building, and how it presents a character, makes you think a certain way about a character. Then again, fills in a lot of that character's backstory to again use your own preconceptions against you, and it makes for a better story. So, like I said, this is probably my favorite series of the year thus far. I don't see anything really beating it out unless something goes crazy. We have a few more months left in the year, but yeah, like I said, I've not done one of these in quite some time, so I apologize if I rambled or forgot some people's names. That's actually kind of norm. But anyways, if you'd like to see more, let me know. Hopefully we'll do some more of these. I want to get some reviews done as well. Read some recent graphic novels I picked up from the library. I think people might be interested in hearing about. So anyways, thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later.